Mhm.
We have not forgotten any of that, but I wanted to make sure that we had an introduction, which is what we did in the fall before we went into our formal study of Vayikra in this semester. We will finish Vayikra in the next 6 weeks, all right? So starting from tonight, for the next 6 weeks, we will be concentrating on the book of Vayikra, which means all the way till the end of February, we will be doing Vayikra. Then we're going to take a brief pause. And then, as I promised you, we will go in on our spring semester of 2024. I will complete the Torah cycle. We will do the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy. So for those of you who've been with us from the very beginning, when we started at Genesis, we did Genesis, Exodus. We skipped to Numbers to finish the narrative portion. We went back to Leviticus to deal with the heart of the Torah. And we will conclude this year, April and May, we will conclude with the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, and that will bring to a close our study of Torah. It's not really a close. You can go back again and again and again. We never exhausted, but we will do that. And then there are some other courses that we're planning. So I'll tell you a little about that perhaps toward the end of this evening. Good. Okay, I see everybody is ready. We are now recording. So tonight's program will be available, and we will send out copies to you right after we conclude this evening, or tomorrow we'll send it out to you. You can always go back and check them on the Learning House station, and they are preserved there for all of us. All right, I'm going to start as we mute you all. I'm going to start by a little introduction. How did we get to this point? Well, we started out by doing a historical survey of Judaism using the Bible as our guide. Okay, so we use the books of Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers, and that gave us a biblical view of history from the creation of the world all the way through the stories of the patriarchs, the leaders of the Jewish people. We ended the first book by going down to Egypt with Joseph and his brothers and the establishment of the Jewish community in Egypt. We continued in the book of Exodus, where we learned of the enslavement of the Jewish people for 210 years in Egypt to Pharaoh. We continued in the book of Exodus. God remembers the Jewish people, and after a period of 210 years of servitude, he hears their cry and he sends to them Moshe, he sends Moses to them with the command to Pharaoh that Pharaoh is to release the people of Israel, to let the Jewish people go, that they might serve their God in the wilderness. Of course, you'll remember that Pharaoh refuses to do so. God and Pharaoh enter into a little contest between them. And at the end of a period of about a year, with the introduction of 10 plagues that befall the Egyptians, finally at the end, Pharaoh's will is broken. He agrees to allow the Jewish people to leave Egypt. And then we begin this 40-year journey that we continued not only in the book of Exodus, but in the book of Numbers. 40 years, which take the Jewish people from being slaves in the land of Egypt, taking them 50 days later to Mount Sinai, where God enters into a covenant with the people of Israel, and they become God's people, and they enter into this covenant. And finally, the history of the desert years, which were not years of, unfortunately, not years of devotion. They were marked by the Jewish people constantly faltering between trying to fulfill the God's covenant and rebelling against it. For 40 years, because of their recalcitrance, they remain unable to go to the land. And finally, after 40 years, when we came to the end of the book of Numbers, God tells the Jewish people to return back to the borders of Israel, and now he is prepared to let them go in. We went from that historical sweep, we went from that historical narrative, we turned back to cover what I said was the heart of the Torah, the book of Vayikra. And I told you that the heart of the Torah, the middle book of the 5 books, the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, is a story of the purpose of the Jewish people. We know what the history is, but why did God enslave us to begin with? Why did God choose our ancestors? Why did he cause us to be enslaved for such a period of time in Egypt? And finally, after a period of 210 years, why did God finally hear the cry of his people in Egypt and send Moses to speak to Pharaoh, that Pharaoh might let the people go? And as a result of God's intervention, the Jewish people are liberated from Egypt, and they begin a 40-year journey to the land of Israel through the wilderness of Sinai. And during those 40 years, God reveals to them his law, his covenant, and the Jewish people in response affirm before God that they will accept his covenant, they will accept his charge to be his people, and the Jewish people commit to trying to live their lives in a certain way. Now, the book of Leviticus defines the way in which we are supposed to live. If you'll remember for just a moment, when the Jewish people, just before they received the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai, God appears to Moses, tells Moses to prepare the Jewish people. And then God says to Moses, just before the giving of the 10 Commandments, he says to him, "And now hearken unto me and observe my covenant. You shall be," meaning Moses and the people of Israel, "you shall be a beloved treasure of all peoples, for mine is the entire world. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." So before the giving of the 10 Commandments, God lays out before Israel their vocation. If they are faithful to God's covenant, if they agree to follow the laws that God is about to give them as part of the covenant, then God says to them, you will be an Am Segula, a special people, a treasured people. You will be a Goy Kadosh, a holy nation, a Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. So you have right there the mission statement of the Jewish people. In the book of Vayikra, it is repeated. In Vayikra, when we get to the middle of the book, God says to the Jewish people, it says, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." So once more, in the book of Vayikra, God says, all right, why did I single you out? Why did I single out your ancestors? Why did I have you go through this period of travail in the land of Egypt? Why did I bring you through 40 years of wandering? In order that you might accept my covenant and you might be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy. And remember, I mentioned to you that the book of Leviticus is all about holiness. And those of you who were with us last semester know we talked about holiness in a lot of different forms. We talked about holiness of time. We talked about holiness of place. We talked about holiness of language, of speech, holiness of diet, holiness of relationships, and holiness of actions. Now, I'm not going to go back all through all that with you. We've already covered that as an introduction. What I want to do this next 6 weeks is to address the following question. If you want to embrace this challenge that God gave you, do you have to become an Orthodox Jew? And I'll answer the question very quickly. No, you do not. I did not expect that at the end of this year or this 2 semesters of study that you would agree, all of you, to observe the commandments of the Torah. You already know that there are 613 commandments, but nowadays, operatively, there's only about 350 commandments you can observe. I didn't expect that as a result of the courses last semester and this semester, that you were all going to become pious, observant people. I didn't expect you to commit yourself to being holy. So what did I expect you to do? Well, what I expected you to do was to think about the possibility that in your lives, wherever you are, you will agree to raise the bar in your own life, to strive to live a more holy existence in your life, in your celebration of days, in your language, in your speech, in your family relationships, in your actions. And we've talked about a lot of areas, but that was very broad. I said to myself, I want to concentrate on 3 areas this trimester, just 3. And so we are going to do that. We're going to do that starting this evening. I'm only going to look at 3 areas of life. Interestingly enough, they are all areas that are very important. If you could make changes in your life in just these 3 areas, how you sanctify time, how you sanctify the way in which you consume the bounty, the food that God gives you, and the way in which you can and if you can sanctify your relationships with those who are most important to you, you can go a long way to being an observant Jew. You know, our rabbis used to say, how do you tell an Orthodox Jew? How do you know if someone is Jewishly observant? What do you look for? You know, and it's a good question. I mean, what do you look for? If I look for a person, if I look for their garb, maybe I can tell by what they wear. Some Jews who are traditional wear very traditional garb. Traditionally Jewish men and women dress modestly. But if you looked at three areas of life, the three key areas of life where holiness is revealed, Judaism always understood what those three areas were. And they said you could always spot people who are more observant and who are more religious and more committed to a holy life by three different areas. How they observe time, Sabbath and holidays, we call that Shomer Shabbat, keeping Shabbat and the holidays. Do they sanctify time? Number two, Shomer Kashrut. Do they eat in a sacred way? Do they eat in a special way? Is the way in which they eat distinguishable from other people's? And finally, Shomer Nigia, their attitudes toward people, other people, especially members of their own family. If you watch the way Jews observe time, Shabbat and holidays, the way they observe dietary restrictions, kashrut, and the way in which they interrelate personally with one another, that can define a traditional Jewish existence. Now, you don't have to be Orthodox in all respects. I'm going to, in this course, outline a far easier path to take. So at the end of this, you don't have to observe all the mitzvot, but I'm going to engage you in this discussion beginning tonight. So let me begin by raising an interesting question for you. God said to the Jewish people, I brought you out from the land of Egypt. I made you go through all these experiences so that you could enter into a covenant with me and you could be a Goy Kadosh, a holy people, a holy nation, and a Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. Now, are the Jews alone in seeing themselves as being a holy nation, or do other peoples in the world also see themselves as being holy? Anybody can respond to that who would like. Apart from the Jewish people, are there any other nations in the world that see themselves as holy? Anybody want to try that? You raise a hand if you do. Go ahead, Lori, take it up on.
I imagine that any religious group in the world would consider themselves holy. I mean, otherwise, why would they have their own religion?
Okay. Lori says Jews are not unique in seeing themselves as being a holy people, a holy nation, a holy religion. Most religions see themselves as being holy. And as a matter of fact, that is absolutely true, Lori, whether it is Christianity or whether it is Islam or whether it's Buddhism or whether it's Shintoism or whether it's Judaism. The truth is, most religions believe that through following a certain path in life, Lori is correct, we can become holy. So Judaism does not have a monopoly on holiness. I just want to tell you that right off the bat. If you think the only way you can be holy is to be Jewish, you are wrong, okay? There are many paths to God. You choose the path that speaks to you most specifically. You choose the direction that speaks to your soul. But if it's not Judaism, it can be any other way. And while Judaism and other religions all believe that the goal is the same, to reach God, to become holy, to live sanctified lives, what God demands and the way you have to live your life will differ from religion to religion. Now, I didn't say religion. I said, God said to Israel, be a holy people or a holy nation, a Goy Kadosh, a holy nation, a holy people. What is the difference between being a religion and being a nation or a people? Does someone want to? Lori has said correctly, other religions see themselves as holy too. But what is meant by someone else, perhaps a holy nation or a holy people? Anybody want to try that one before I give it back to Lori? I see your hand going up there. Anybody else want to respond? What is a holy nation? Okay. A nation is not just a religion, although it could be. Okay, Lori, go ahead.
A nation that embraces a belief in God or a God.
Good. Okay. What
I
is a
don't know.
nation, Lori?
A nation is a group of people that identify with the same values and government and
Okay, good. A nation is a group of people that identify together on the basis of their relationship with God, on the basis of their connection as a people, as a nation, as a state, if you will. They define themselves as religious because the union of the people, so people coming together, see themselves not just individually tied to God, but as a people, as a nation, they see themselves tied to God. Now, I'm going to give you a little quiz here. Does anybody know how many different countries there are in the world today? Today. And you can take this, you can take this as that. Go ahead, Jerry, give me the number.
I'll say over 200.
Not quite. You're close, but not quite there. There may have been at one time, but not quite 200. Anybody want to, close to 200? Well, I'm going to give it to Jerry. He's as close. 196, Jerry.
Oh, well, then he got it.
196. So you win the prize. You know, you're 4 off. 196. There are 196 countries in the world today. Now, all of you know that every country is identified from other countries. One way in which we identify countries is by maps, correct? A national flag. Would anybody care to guess how many of the national flags, 196 is the total number, what percentage of the national flags have in the flag itself, a religious symbol? What percentage of the 196 national flags? Okay. Lori, your hand's up. Go ahead.
it's a maybe. Maybe like 1%. I'm thinking of the
1%.
flags.
Yeah.
And I mean, Israel is obviously one, but
Right.
I can't recall any other flag that
All right.
has
Anybody
a
else want
religious
to add to
symbol.
what Lori says? Israel is the obvious one. All right, I'm going to show you something now that's going to blow you away. Okay, Rand, can we share this with everybody?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
I really cannot.
You cannot see where,
really
oh,
know
share
how to
screen
see.
right there. Okay. This will startle you right there. Right, yes. Nope, right here,
I
share,
know,
okay.
it's
Yeah, there you
share.
go.
Just
Can all of you see
yes,
that?
Once you see them, they can see it.
Okay. When I wait until you can all see
They
what
can
I have
see
on
it.
the,
I
can you all
guarantee.
see what I have there? All right, thumbs
Yes.
up. All right. Lori, it's not 1%. It's almost 33% of all national flags have a religious symbol. If you look at these flags for a moment, you have symbols of Christianity, and it lists 31 flags that incorporate symbol of Christianity in the flag. If you look at Islam, you will see, Lori and others, that there are 21 nations that use a religious symbol, usually the crescent, as part of their symbol on their flag. Other religions, there are 6. Hindu and Buddhist, there are 5, and the only Jewish symbol that's used in a flag is for Israel. Out of 196 countries, okay, 64 countries have religious symbols in their flags. Does that surprise you? Okay, it shouldn't. it may surprise you. And by the way, if you look at, for example, Europe, you look at Finland, you look at Switzerland, you look at Sweden, you look at the Great Britain, you look at Australia, you can see the religious symbols right there. Do you all see the crosses in the in the flags that are there? That is
What about
not,
Austria?
yeah, you
Rabbi,
see the
what
cross.
about
That is not unusual. There are different kinds of crosses and different colors, but they're all crosses of different kinds. If you look underneath it at the Islamic symbols, you all see the crescent shapes of the different flags of the Muslim countries. And then if you look down further, you will see, that's not quite so clear, I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. You'll see the symbols there. What does that mean? I didn't even.
Ron, I've got a clarifying question. I'm a little confused.
Yes,
Because
go ahead.
you went from how many nations to
There are
how many
108
countries.
Yes, how many nations or countries are synonymous?
No, I don't think I disagree. I would
Okay.
say that countries are geographic and are governed geographically. However, like the nation of Judaism, it's not its state governance, it's the Old Testament, which is the governing book. So it's the nation of Judaism and like the nation of Islam. In other words, when you talk about the nation of, not the uh, federal country or the geographic country. I'm thinking out loud. I'm just turning them around on each other.
Yeah, but Neil, the truth of the matter is that of the 196 different countries in the world, 64 of them have in their national flags or their coats of arms or their mottos have religious symbols identified with it. Forget what, the difference between, when I said nations, I mean countries. How many modern countries incorporate religious symbols in their country? The fact of the matter is many people are shocked because they assume that religion isn't that big a part of the world today. But fully 1/3 of the nations of the world have in their national flags religious symbols. And by the way, Neil, if I were going to go into national colors, because there are certain colors, for example, green in Muslims, if I were to go into national colors, it would be more than 64 countries. It would be closer to 80 or 90 countries that incorporate religious colors in their flags. So the amazing thing I'm telling you all is that if you look at the flags of the world, you look at the flags of the nations of the world, 64 countries of the 196 countries of the world incorporate a religious symbol in a flag, whether it's a cross, whether it's a crescent, whether there are shapes connected with the Eastern religions, whether it's Buddhism or Hinduism or Shintoism or the Star of David. Fully 1/3 of the countries of the world have incorporated in their flags a religious symbol. Why is that? Does someone want to tell me? We'll continue to look at the symbols for a moment. Why is that the case? Why do so many countries, and this is important for you to understand because I want you to understand that Judaism is not the only religion and Jews are not the only nation that claim to be a holy people. Why is it that so many countries identify as religious countries? Okay. Why is it that so many countries in their national flags incorporate a religious symbol? I'm going back to the full screen now because I want to be able to see everybody. It's the stop share right there. Okay. Okay. There we go. All right. All right. So here's the question to you. I've just shown you that 1/3 of the countries of the world incorporate a religious symbol in their flag. Okay. Why? Why? Anybody? Yes, go ahead, Gary. Gary, unmute yourself.
I'm going to say that there is just a great desire to connect to God.
Okay. Why?
The fulfillment in life, to be connected to God.
Okay. And why does a country want to connect with God? This is hard, Gary. Go ahead.
A little stumped on that one, Rabbi Ron. A little stumped.
All right. Look, if I say to you, is America a Christian country? Some of you would rightly say to me, no, it's a non-religious country. We may have had a Judeo-Christian heritage. The pilgrims who came here, who started out, they believed in Christianity. But America is officially not considered a Christian country, despite the fact that some people think that it is a Christian country, but it's not. And yet, America, even though its flag does not contain any religious items, is considered by many to be a religious country. Why is it that nations want to identify as being religious? You may want to identify individually as being Christian of one sort or another, or Jewish or Muslim or whatever. But why do nations want to do it? Really think about this. Go ahead, Joseph.
I think maybe, going back in time when these flags were established, that perhaps the kings or governments wanted to invoke God's protection for the nation and for the government.
Very good, Joseph. Because the legitimacy of all countries is based upon divine sanction. When I tell you a country has a symbol, a national symbol, that symbolizes sovereignty. But when I tell you that as part of that national symbol, it uses religious symbols, it is because all countries claim to represent the values of God. Okay? So I'm telling you this now. If you think Judaism is unique in saying that God centered us out or sorted us out or selected us as a holy people, every country sees itself in that way, okay? Jews are not the only, and Israel is not the only country in the world that sees itself as a Jewish state. If I were to ask the question, how many nations in the world identify as being Christian nations, it would be even more than have Christian symbols in their flags, all right? As a matter of fact, let me show you something else you may interest you. Let's show everybody a national, share the screen one more time, okay? And let's do, there we go. I'm going to show you. Okay, everybody take a look at that. First of all, can someone tell me what we're looking at here? What am I looking at here? What is this? Okay, and I don't see everybody, so you have to ring in if you think you know what you're looking at. This is not a national flag. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, well, that's being from England. It's a coat of arms.
It's a coat of arms of England, okay? By the way, the animals, you notice the lion and the unicorn, they all have significance and the colors have significance. But look what it says at the bottom.
God on my right. God on my right.
Dieu au monde, yeah, Dieu au monde droit. It says Dieu au monde droit. Okay, it's French. You're very good. Okay, I'm pulling up more of you here. Does someone want to translate what that means for me? This is on the English code of. Go ahead.
Yeah. Which part of it you want to translate? I can't read it all.
Dieu et mon
God on my right.
God and my right.
Right.
By the way, if you want to know when that was first coined, there's a difference in history. When did that become part of the English motto, the English coat of arms? Some people say it was Henry V in 1400s. Some people say no, it goes back to Richard I, Richard the Lionhearted, in the 1100s to 1200s. But this or something similar is found in flags or coats of arms that says God and my right. Does someone want to explain what that means to me? What does the phrase God and my right mean? Go ahead, Jerry, I see your hand.
I guess it means going back to the divine right of kings.
Very good, Jerry. The divine right of kings. By what virtue, by what right does a sovereign, does a nation, does a leader of a nation claim to be the legitimate ruler of that nation? And the answer is the divine right of kings. Do you all understand what the divine right of kings is? The king, the ruler of a nation, derives that right from God himself. By the way, the British monarchy, I just finished watching The Crown. The British sovereign is not only the sovereign over Britain, Great Britain, and over the Commonwealth, the British monarch is also called the defender of the faith. Defender of the faith. The British monarch is also the religious head of what is called the Church of England. Do you know that? Okay. So what that means is that religious, secular heads see themselves as being the representative of God's will, that they rule by virtue of divine authority, okay? I want you to understand this, that when a ruler rules, the divine right of kings says that a ruler's right to rule is based on the divine approval of that ruler, and his will and his law and his governance of the country is approved by God himself. Now, can different nations claim to be God's official representative? Yes. I told you the Jews claim to be, in the Torah it says, God says, you shall be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation to me. You shall be selected. But other nations see themselves as religious too. And not only religions that have, countries that have an official religion. The Vatican, as you know, has an official religion. The Church of England has an official religion. There are many countries in the world, including countries that have religious symbols on their flag, that believe that there is an official religion for that country. Does every citizen have to follow that religion? No. You can be the citizen of a country and not follow that country's particular religion. But chances are, depending on where you live, if you live in certain countries, you're probably going to be identified as a Christian of one sort or another, whether that is Catholic or Protestant. If you live in other countries, you are going to be identified as Muslim, even though there may be other religions there. It is a Muslim state. And we know that there are nations that identify as Muslim nations, just as there are nations in the world that identify as Christian nations. It is not unusual for a nation to have an identity that is not only secular, but is also religious. How far back does that go? And who can tell me where this all started? And by the way, I can give you other phrases too. I said, Dieu au mon droit, God in my right. During the Crusades, the Crusaders, who came from many different kingdoms and went to the Holy Land to conquer it back from the invading Muslims, had the Latin phrase as part of their motto, Deus vult, God wills it. They believed that they were conducting a holy war to free the lands where Christianity had started, which had been taken over by Muslims. And this crusade was undertaken because the Pope had decreed that God ruled it. God ruled that Christianity should conquer the lands of Christ, of Jesus, back for Christendom. The Muslims have their own doctrine. They define it not just as a holy war, they call it jihad, but that means that if a nation has become Islamic and has fallen under Sharia law, that nation is forever Islamic, and Islam has the requirement of taking back that nation and restoring to it Islam. And in Islam, like Christianity, sees its eventual goal as uniting the world under the will of Allah, okay? And nations throughout history have had this same kind of concept, okay? Whatever the nation was, the Holy Roman Empire, which began in the 1500s, really, was not Roman. It was not necessarily holy, and it wasn't necessarily an empire. But that's the way they fashioned themselves, the Holy Roman Empire. In Germany, during the classic period of German dominance in the 17 and 1800s, when they went to war, the phrase was Gott mit uns. God is with us. God is with us. In other words, when we go to battle, when we fight, we never have to fear because we are guaranteed victory because God is with us. Think about how many wars have been fought in history. One religion against another, one people against another. Religious wars, even within a religion. In the 1600s, there were terrible wars in Islam, in Europe, fought between Catholics and Protestants. There were religious wars, okay? And each side claimed they represented the will of God. Whether you were supported the Puritan forces or the Catholic forces, each side claimed that the other side was an enemy of God and they represented God's will. Okay, Deus vult, God wills it. Gott mit uns, God is with us. We are fighting a holy struggle. This has been going on throughout history. I just want to let you know, if you think that the claim that Judaism makes, that it is a holy religion singled out by God for the purpose of instructing the world, uniting the world, bringing the world together, Judaism is not unique. Every religion does that. The only question that we have to define is, how do they intend to bring the world together? How do they intend to make the world one? Is it through conquest, or is it through behavior? Do I bring the world together by living a life that other people look at and say, this is a wise people, this is a nation that clearly has God in their midst, I want to be part of that nation? Or you go out and you conquer the world in the name of God, and you subject everybody else to your belief on the theory that once the world is unified under the belief in God that you hold sacred, that the world is one and the world is unified. If you think that it's done through war, if you think that the object of being a holy people is to forcibly convert through conquest every other nation of the world and bend them to the truth that you hold as being sacred, that's one way of doing it. I can tell you that has been a very painful lesson for the world. That has been the history of the world through most of time. We have God with us. God is on our side. God is the right. God defines the power, the rights of a nation. And if you stand against the nation, if you stand against the sovereign, if you stand against the ruler, you stand against God. You know where this first took place? The land of Egypt, only with a little bit of a twist. It wasn't that the head of the country was God's representative. Originally, the head of the country was God. Was God, okay? If you look at Pharaoh, Pharaoh was viewed as divine. Divine. He was an aspect of God. The same was true of Babylonian religions. It wasn't just that God gave the secular ruler the right to rule in his name. It was that the secular ruler was himself God. Think of the contest between Moses and Pharaoh, okay? Pharaoh said, I am Pharaoh. I am a descendant of the gods. Therefore, my will is my will is the way it should be. I want these people, these Israelites, to be my slave. And along comes this rebel, Moses, and says, you're not God. You don't have a right to this people. This people's God is the God of Israel. They have their own God. And this God from Sinai says, let my people go. You haven't the right to subject them. They don't belong to you, Pharaoh. They belong to me. And what is the story of the 10 plagues? What is the story of the confrontation, if not the story of how Pharaoh, at the end of this process, is bent to the will of God? Pharaoh is forced to concede that he does not control the Jewish people, that he is not God, that the gods of Egypt don't determine the fate of the world. He says finally at the end to Moses, go pray to your God, and when you pray to him, pray on my behalf too. Let him send aid to me. In other words, God confronts Pharaoh in a confrontation, and ultimately Pharaoh must acknowledge that he, Pharaoh, is not God, but God is God. And by the way, you can go to other cultures, Mesopotamia, other kingdoms, other nations, even in Greece, even in Rome. The Greek rulers in the Hellenistic period, the Roman rulers, they saw themselves as God. The divine Nero, they saw themselves as being the representation of God. Not just that God sanctioned them, that they were themselves worshipped as gods, and offerings were presented to these leaders because they were themselves divine. You understand what I'm saying? Go ahead, Lori.
I think that these rulers used whatever it took to be in control, because I don't really, maybe they thought that religion and being divine was, they really believed that, but I honestly feel that perhaps their way of gaining control over as many people as they could was to use the divine influence. And I think we see it today.
Okay. So
And
you think that they didn't really think they were God, they were only using God as an instrument, Lori? Is that what you're saying? That they were
it's
using...
hard to know, but I I can't imagine that these people who are so hungry for controlling other people really embrace religion and God as they're supposed to. I think they're so into themselves and so narcissistic and so wanting that control that they view that is their medium, that their way of gaining that. So maybe they did in some part, but I don't feel like they really embrace the whole divine issue to obtain what they want.
Very good, Lori. And the truth is, there are some rulers who did not begin their rules by believing they were God. Alexander the Great, if you know the history of Alexander, did not believe he was a god. By the time he ended his life at the young age of 30-something, he actually thought he was a god. It may have been his contact with the Asian religions or whatnot, but Alexander actually came to believe that he was a god. The early Romans, especially in the time of the Republic, did not believe that the emperor was God, but at a certain period, Lori, they actually came to believe that they were God. And I think they reached a period where maybe they did it partially to bolster, as you say, their authority or their sovereignty or their power, but eventually they actually came to believe it. Antiochus, the villain of the Hanukkah story, why did the Maccabees revolt? Because Antiochus, who was a national leader, the leader of the Hellenistic Syrians, wasn't enough for him. He wanted to be worshipped as gods. He wanted Jews in their temples to offer sacrifices to him as God. Was he merely trying to take this divine authority and use it to legitimate his power? Maybe. But a lot of them actually believed that they were gods. Okay, I know this is hard to believe. Judaism never made that claim. But in many, many religions, the head of the state, the authority, was himself God. I was watching, again, Randy and I just finished watching 6 seasons of The Crown. And Elizabeth took very seriously her role as defender of the faith in trying to justify, can people marry if they did what? She took very seriously her role. I cannot do this. I cannot allow this because I, as the head of the Church of England, I am a religious head. I am the head of the church. And how can I allow this to occur? Because God has invested me with being the head of this church, and I haven't the right to do it, even though I may personally recognize that marriage between people who are divorced and people who are, and other people are maybe not a problem anymore. What happens is eventually you become to believe it. You come to see that this is your will, and you feel like you have no power. And by the way, the same can be true of Islam or anything else. You actually feel that as the head of a country, which has an official religion, which is sanctified by the powers above you, that you must enforce the rules of God. Now, all this has been, go ahead, Lori. Yes, you're shaking your finger. Go ahead.
But enforcing the rules
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily make you God.
No, that is true. And nowadays, I would say, Lori, that most rulers do not believe that they are God anymore. So if you're asking me, is that a belief that's held in the world today, that most rulers see themselves as God? I would say no. That was a belief that was held, Lori, in the ancient world. When you talk about Pharaoh or early religions, the heads of these various countries saw themselves as the living embodiment or representation of the deity. If I were to say, do present leaders see themselves as God? I would not make that statement. But they see themselves as the leaders of a nation, upholding the values of the religion that the nation honors as God's representative. So I agree with you, Lori. Modern leaders don't identify as God anymore. That would be a little beyond the pale for most people. And that's true of Islamic leaders and Christian leaders. No one says, I am God. and Jewishly. No one says, I am the divinity, my law is the law for all. But they claim to represent God, and they claim to represent values which are supposed to be law universal, which extend to everybody, not just to my people, but if everybody was right thinking, everybody would recognize the truth that I have just said to you, that God has a particular religion he favors. He has a particular people or nation that he favors, and that he has revealed to that people and that nation a way of life which he wants to be universal. Okay? I've suggested that for Judaism, but Judaism is not unique in that respect. In every country that takes religion seriously and that believes that believes that it has a national religion, it sees its national religion as being superior to, higher than, more accurately reflecting the will of God than any other religion. So now, having said that, here comes the problem. I have told you that Judaism is not the only religion that makes that claim. There are other religions of all different sorts that make that same claim. There are, even in the modern world, some societies that have no religion, that don't claim to be religious at all, but claim that the state itself has the absolute right to define itself. The Soviet Union no longer exists, but communist China and whatnot. There are certain countries which would not identify the source of values as being religion, but they would say that the values of the country represent the values that should be embraced worldwide. How do you choose between all of these religions that claim, this is just the introductory session, how do you choose which one is legitimate? If they all are making the claims and these religions are all different, they can't all be right. Okay, you all recognize that if religions are different and if they have different approaches to God and what's sacred and what's not, and different practices that are to be followed or not followed, how do you possibly decide which religion is speaking the truth? Anybody want to try that one? Go ahead, Erwin. You've got the floor.
Well, my guess is that it tends to be the group that you were born into, that you were raised in, and that you were taught in.
All right, so it's indoctrination. The faith and the religion that I was brought up in, that's the religion I believe is the true religion. Is that what you're saying, Erwin?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That's absolutely honest. For most people, by the way, Erwin's answer is the correct answer. How do I know it's true? Because this is what I was raised. This is what I was taught. This is what I believe. This is what everyone around me who shares my faith believes. Therefore, that's the true religion. Okay. You didn't choose your religion. You were born into an environment in which your religion was imparted to you, impressed upon you, sealed into your soul, to the point where you now think you embraced it because this is what you were taught. What Erwin is saying is, if you were born in a different place under a different religious system, you would believe that was the true religion. Is that what you're saying, Erwin? That depending on where you were born, you would embrace whatever religion you in the country you were born held?
Well, but we talked about difference between nations and religions. Within a nation, there are many different religions, so it could be not just where you're from, but what group you are associated with, or what group you were born into.
Okay. The fact that most people in what we would call Christian countries believe in Christianity may be a coincidence. The fact that most people who live in what are called Muslim countries are Muslim and believe in Islam may be a coincidence. The fact that so many people who live in Israel may believe that they are Jewish and that Judaism is definitive may be coincidental or may not be. I mean, are we socialized into the religions we adopt, or are we truly so open-minded that we can look at all the religions of the world, go on a quest, do a thorough study, maybe travel throughout the world, and do we honestly believe that, quite apart from where we grew up and what the religion in which we were raised and in religion of our countries. Do we really believe we're free to choose whatever religion we want? Do any of you believe that? Okay. I mean, it's really a very powerful question. Are you whatever religion you are because that's the way you were raised, that's the way your parents raised you, that were the values, those were the values you grew up in, those are the values of the society in which you live? Or if you live as a minority in a country which is different than yours, are you different than the majority culture because of the way you were raised, because of your personal history, or because somehow or another you intuited a different religion? There are very few people who come to their religion through thought themselves. There are some people who say, I'm going to explore the religions of the world and I am going to study each and every religion and the one that makes the most sense to me, regardless of how I was brought up, regardless of how I was raised, regardless of the traditions I was comfortable in my home, in my family. I'm going to embrace the religion that makes the most sense to me. Very few people are able to do that. I'm telling you. We would like to think we all can do it, but in truth, it's very, very hard to do. We usually gravitate toward the religions of the society or of the culture or of the family in which we are raised. Leslie, go ahead.
So then what does it say for somebody that does change?
It says that that person has made a fundamental change in their life. In Judaism, for example, when you change your religion, you change, Leslie, your family. You not only change your religion, you change your people. You know, you're given in Judaism a new name, whatever name you choose, Hebrew name you choose, and you're called Ben Avraham or Bat Sarah. So-and-so, the son of Abraham or the daughter of Sarah. You not only change, Leslie, your religion, you identify with a new people, okay? I guess what I'm saying is that true religious change is not just change of religion, it's change of peoplehood as well. What it says about you is that you have made a fundamental shift in your life to where you see yourself as an entirely different person from the person you once were. I studied with many, go ahead,
Yeah.
Leslie, go ahead. Go ahead.
I want to thank you for that, because you know that my brother is something else.
Mm-hmm.
And with what's going on in the world, he's really has, stepped away from me. And I don't know if it has to do with the religion or whatever, but what you're saying, he doesn't identify. His memories are not mine anymore. And
No.
I understand now a little bit better.
Yes. And once you have made that identification, once you identify with a group that is different perhaps from the group to which you were born, you have become, in a very real sense, let's say, a different person. It's not merely that you have accepted a different faith, it is you have become an entirely different person. And you can actually be born into a religion, not appreciate it, and then suddenly appreciate it, and that's called being born again. Okay? You can be born into a religion, not really appreciate it, not really understand it, and someone says, well, I was raised as a Christian or whatnot, but I never really understood what it was until I was born again, which doesn't mean you were literally born again. It means that even though you were nominally Christian, your faith experience changed and you were born again in your new identity as a religious person. And Judaism has that. You become a different person. You become a different person, which is why it's so hard to become a convert, I will tell you, because you change not only your religion, you change your nationhood, your people, everything and if you're going to be a Jew, you take on the destiny of the Jewish people, which right now a lot of people don't want to take on, okay? How many people want to be hated by a good portion of the world? So when you change to a religion which is not popular and not well-liked, you are not merely changing on the basis of your beliefs, you are identifying with the people who in many, many quarters of the world, including where there are no Jews, are not particularly liked or popular. Imagine how hard that is, okay? Yes, go ahead, Carol.
At one time in my life, I was contemplating converting, to Catholicism.
Mhm.
And my father and mother, and I'm an only child, no less, were obviously very upset. And my father said to me, "You are Jewish, you were born Jewish, you will always be Jewish." Now, I don't know if that made me change my mind, or I know I changed my mind and I stuck to it, obviously. And but is that did he say something that was correct to me at that point?
He was saying something which was deeper than he said. He said to you, Carol, my daughter, you may theologically have different positions than Judaism stands for. You may think of yourself as gravitating toward another religion, but I am telling you, despite the fact that you may find another religion more compatible, you can never cease to be a Jew, because being a Jew, my daughter, is not just a religious identification, it's being part of a nation, part of a people. You think you can convert from Judaism to Christianity. The truth is, he's telling you, although you could have, you will always be, you will never be able to give up who you are as a person, because that intrinsically entails you being a Jew. Was he right? No, he wasn't right. You could have become a Catholic. You could have become Carol. And there are plenty of Catholics who are today practicing Catholics who began their life as Jews or as Christians of other denominations. There are many Jews in history. We know this from the years of the Inquisition, Jews who converted to Christianity, not even willingly under pain of death, but who after a generation or two or three became nominally Christian. They were Christian believers. It can happen, Carol. You can lose that connection. But it's not just a matter of holding a different faith. If you were seriously contemplating adopting another faith, you also had to deal with leaving the Jewish people. Maybe that's what your father was saying to you. You can choose another faith. You can choose to worship God in a different way. But Carol, you can't choose to be a different person. And who you are is reflected in the people into whom you were born. You can never give up on that. I don't know that he's correct, but I think that's what he was saying. Okay. Go ahead, Jerry.
I've always been fascinated in my journey and studying spiritual things. Zechariah 8:23, that refers to 10 men symbolizing nations, all nations, languages, taking hold of the hem or the skirt of a Jew, saying, "We're going to go with you because we've heard that God is with you people."
All right. That's the convincing argument. Judaism always said, we're not going to convert the world. We don't intend to conquer the world. First of all, there aren't that many Jews in the world. We constitute 0.19% of the population. In this world population, there are only 15.2 million Jews, 0.19. Obviously, we're not going to conquer the world through force or through mass conversion of peoples. Judaism has always said, live your life the way you believe God has instructed you to live it, and other nations will see you. Other nations will see you, and they will say, surely this is a wise and understanding people who has laws such as this. In other words, it was convinced by example, convinced not by conquest or by force. Don't force other people to be Jewish, but live your life, and the example of your life should, in the end, convince people that there is something wise and special about this way of life. I'm going to examine that over the next 5 weeks. Is that possibly true, or is that not true? But here is my comment to you. So long as you attempt to share what you believe with other people, and so long as you don't beat them over the head with it, and so long as you don't insist that my way is the only way, and if you do not see my way, the one way to God, then you have lost truth. You have lost salvation. You have lost becoming close to God. If we view this as a single movement, the one way, one vehicle to God and through the correct religion, we have misunderstood Judaism, and we have, I would say, misunderstood God. A God who could create so many unique peoples would not have created one way to him. It doesn't make sense that God can write off a large proportion of the planet by saying they didn't have the correct way, they didn't come to me through this way or that way, therefore they are doomed to suffer damnation, and only the people who come to me through the way that I have sanctified and sanctioned, only they will be saved, only they will gain salvation. My understanding of God does not limit salvation to one group of people following one faith. That's my conviction, that God is big enough to love all people. He is wise enough to understand that people need many ways to God, and therefore he is not going to close the door to people because of a difference of belief. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think that Jews today are not doing themselves a favor by saying, look, we represent so many Nobel Prize winners and so many famous musicians, etc., and so forth? I think that does a lot to making the non-Jewish world hate Jews a little bit more.
Well, I think they say, we can't tell you that we are the true religion because we can't prove it. But look about how many Nobel Prize winners we have. And look how small a percentage, 0.19% of the world population. Look how Judaism, that small nation of so few people, has influenced the world. We're trying to convince you by statistics. I can convince you by statistics that Judaism is the right way. Because how can you explain the fact that 0.19% of the world can have this influence over the world? But it is simply, Mike, and another attempt to try and convince the world that there is something special about what you believe.
But we shouldn't be hitting people over the head with that. I think we should.
No, you shouldn't hit people over the head with it. First of all, they don't like it. They don't like it when you do that. And I never knew of people who were convinced to convert to Judaism because they believed they had a better chance of winning a Nobel Prize. It never happened in my life. And I never thought, and first of all, don't believe, for whatever reason, if you believe that Jews control the world, I will tell you now, don't convert to Judaism because you will never control the world becoming Jewish, okay? If you believe that there is some kind of power inherent in choosing the right religion, it is wrong. The way to God is multiple, but I'm going to make the argument in the weeks that follow, and with this I will close, that in 3 areas I think I can show you how whatever your religion is, in the areas of sanctifying time, sanctifying diet, and sanctifying relationships, whatever your religion, I can make you a better person, okay? If you are a Catholic, I'll make you a better Catholic. If you are Protestant, I'll make you a better Protestant. If you're Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim, I'll make you a better person in whatever the religion you choose, not by forcing you to change your religion. You do not have to. I'm not going to argue that Judaism is the only path. I am going to argue in the next 5 weeks, there are certain insights that the idea of sanctifying time, diet, and relationship, that all religions can benefit by, and that all religions can be enriched by. And if I convince you of that at the end, I don't expect you to come and become a member of the synagogue or anything. I just expect you to live a more religious life. I expect you to value holiness. I expect you to believe that there is more in this world than just the material world around us, that there is a force in the universe which makes for holiness. And however we approach that force in the universe, if we sensitize ourselves to it, if we recognize the holy in the world, we can be better people through whatever religion you choose, okay? That's my quest, okay? I will send out the materials to you tomorrow for a lesson. We're going to start with sanctifying time. And I'm going to start with a very simple proposition. You don't have to do this particular ritual or that particular ritual, but Judaism has something very interesting to say about time. It says, don't take time for granted. I was at a memorial service yesterday, and I said to the people that were there, you know, the most precious thing in the world is the thing we take for granted the most. You know what the most precious thing in the world is? The most sacred thing in the world? your time. If you waste time, you will never get it back. I'm telling you this now. You lose money, you can recuperate money. You lose millions, you gain millions. You destroy a relationship, you can get it back. If your actions are not righteous, you can return. Whatever you lose in time, you will never, ever get it back. Which isn't to say that you can't change your ways, but once you've lost time, a moment that is past forever. You can never gain that moment back. And here's the situation. There are many of us in life that live our life as if moments don't count. That time doesn't matter, that we have all the time in the world. But the truth is we don't have all the time in the world. You cheat yourself out of holiness if you don't recognize that every single moment in life can be holy. I'm going to try and describe to you how to make time holy by experiences, by family, by gathering together, by sanctifying. I'm going to try and teach you that whatever your religious tradition, if you take time seriously, you can make your life more religious. You can make your life more holy. Okay? Time matters. One last story. True. I once had a man who said to me, Rabbi, he said, I love my wife and she died. And I said, okay. He said, but you don't understand. I loved her and I never told her. I never told her I loved her. He said, I loved her. I did love her, but we just didn't talk about those kind of things. And he said, I will never be able to get back the fact that I never told her how important she was to me and how significant she was in my life. What do you say to a person who has experienced that, or a person who can't say I'm sorry, or a person who can't forgive? When those moments are gone, they can change your life. Don't not say I'm sorry. Don't not say I love you if you have the opportunity. Every moment is precious. And when I leave, when I go somewhere, I always say I love you. I always try and let my wife and my children, my family know how much I love them, because God forbid my last words to the people who mean most to me in life should be words of anger or should be words of neglect. I live my life believing that time is holy. And I'm going to try next week and show you that time is holy and how you can incorporate that into your life. With that, I'll conclude for this evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. This will be available tomorrow. I will send you the readings for next week and everything. But I hope I've showed you tonight that the idea of sanctifying life, of making life holy, of living our life to try and live up to an expectation that God has of us is something we can do in our lives, in our actions. Good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're quite
Thank you, Rabbi Rod.
You're quite welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very
Good
much. Very
Good.
meaningful. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Night.
Everybody have a good week.
Have a good week.
We'll try.
And
Good night.
we
Good
can
night.
unrecord, recording us right there.